Most RPGs give you the illusion of choice. A fork in the road that leads to the same destination, a morality meter that shifts a number up or down, a dialogue wheel that changes which cutscene plays. These 10 games do something different. They build worlds where your decisions, or your failure to act, or the nature of the character you've built, carry weight that bends the entire game around them. Some of them will end badly no matter what you do. Some of them will end worse because of exactly who you chose to be. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is the most controversial game on this list within its own fandom, and it earned that position by making choices its predecessor's audience found unforgivable. The world isn't a nation at war, it's a dream. Marsh, the protagonist, wants to wake up. His friends don't. His brother, Dund, is crippled in the real world and walks in this one. The law system, judge-enforced rules that change what actions are permitted in each battle, is a direct expression of the dream world's internal logic, a world that maintains itself through compliance. Marsh fights it anyway. Whether that makes Marsh brave or cruel is the question the game refuses to answer cleanly. The support he dismantles is real. The pain he's pulling people back toward is real. The game never frames either the dream world or the real world as unambiguously correct. It frames the choice itself and the person making it. That moral ambiguity lives inside a tactical combat system that trades tactics' political weight for something more accessible. The job system opens quickly. The missions are varied. The multiplayer connectivity features gave the GBA version a social layer that aged poorly but mattered in context. The law system specifically is worth defending. It's annoying in the way any constraint is annoying, and it was widely criticized on release for exactly that reason. But it's also the mechanical embodiment of what the story is about. A world that punishes you for breaking its rules, even when breaking them is the only honest thing to do. Not every game earns that kind of integration between theme and system. This one does. Shin Megami Tensei 4 opens in a medieval kingdom and reveals Tokyo 60 hours before the player does. The samurai class system Flynn is trained into, the quests that seem routine, the social hierarchies. All of it is prologue to a present-day city sealed under a dome and overrun by demons, where 3 factions are fighting over what humanity should become. The neutral path, which requires making choices that neither law nor chaos can accept, is one of the hardest things to achieve in the series. Not because the final dungeon is brutal, though it is, but because the ideology it demands is genuinely difficult to maintain when the game keeps presenting you with situations designed to pull you sideways. The press turn system, where landing hits on weaknesses earns additional turns, and missing or getting hit costs them, gives every encounter a tempo the player can read and exploit or fail to and suffer for. Demon Fusion, the act of combining 2 demons into something stronger with selectable skills carried forward, is a puzzle that rewards understanding the whole system rather than following a recipe. Flynn doesn't speak, which gives the demons around him room to define the morality of each faction, and the game takes that seriously enough that every major alignment choice feels like a real ideological position rather than a slider value. What SMT4 does that most alignment systems don't is give the bad options genuine philosophical coherence. The law route's theocracy and the chaos route's brutal hierarchy are both internally consistent worldviews held by characters who believe in them, which makes choosing neutral feel less like finding the correct answer and more like refusing both conclusions, because neither is survivable.
The village gathered in this forest.
Breath of Fire 4 is the story of a god assembled from the wrong pieces. Folu is the first half of a divine emperor, separated from his other half across centuries, and the game follows both him and Ryu, the second half, reborn human, on converging paths that the player watches from both sides simultaneously. This dual narrative structure is what separates this from almost every RPG of its era. You spend significant time playing as the villain, watching what the Empire does to him, and by the end you understand completely why he wants to end humanity. The game doesn't ask you to agree with him. It makes you comprehend him. The Dragon Gene system, which lets Ryu combine elemental genes to transform into increasingly powerful forms, sits inside a turn-based combat structure that rewards formation strategy and stack management in ways the surface presentation undersells. Master skills transfer between characters through a linked apprenticeship system. The visual style is clean 2D sprites against rendered backgrounds, with the character designs giving the cast an unusual elegance. It holds up in a way that many contemporaries don't. What the story does in its final hours is the reason the game appears on this kind of list. The Empire's treatment of Folu and the specific weapon they use against him is one of the bleakest moments in the franchise's history. Quiet, deliberate, and built entirely from choices the player never made, but lived alongside long enough to feel responsible for. The ending Ryu reaches is ultimately hopeful, but Breath of Fire 4 earns that hope by showing the full cost of what preceded it. Mass Effect 3 carries every decision made across 2 games into its final act, which means the world it ends is the world the player built. Who survived the suicide mission? Whether the genophage was cured or sabotaged? Whether the Geth and Quarians found peace? These aren't cosmetic changes to a fixed narrative. They alter which allies appear in the final hours, which war assets are available, which relationships have anything left in them. A player who made consistently destructive choices across the trilogy arrives at the finale with fewer resources, fewer allies, and fewer people still standing who care whether the protagonist lives. The Reaper threat is finally given real weight here. The invasion isn't a threat level on a map, it's places you've been and people you knew. Tachanka under siege means something if you spend time there. The Krogan's role in the final push means something if you know what Rex or Grunt did to get there. The game accumulates meaning from its predecessors in a way the finale then spins, and the emotional ledger works only because the series earned it. The ending controversy is worth addressing directly. The 3 final choices have been criticized since launch for collapsing the trilogy's consequence-driven design into a single 3-option button prompt. That criticism is structurally correct. It's also worth separating from the question of whether the journey to that ending is extraordinary, because it is. The extended cut added closure to the individual faction outcomes. What was always there, the final conversation with the elusive man, the moment on the Normandy before the push, the weight of everyone who didn't make it. None of that needed fixing. Wrath of the Righteous puts more mechanical pressure on alignment than any other CRPG in recent memory. The Mythic Path system isn't just cosmetic. Each path changes which companions trust you, which quest lines remain open, which NPCs survive the crusade, and how the game's final act resolves. The Lich Path specifically lets you turn companions into undead servants, and the game treats this as a genuine relationship shift, not a power upgrade. Characters who trusted you have to decide whether to stay. The crusade mechanic, managing armies across the campaign map between story acts, is the game's most controversial design choice. It adds a real-time strategy layer that interrupts the isometric CRPG rhythm and has been widely regarded as the system Owlcat balanced least successfully. That criticism stands, but the story and character writing around it justify the investment in a way that's hard to articulate without simply describing moments. The encounter at the start of Act 4, the specific thing the Demon Path requires you to do if you take it far enough, the different readings of Arila Vorlesh, depending on which path you're on. The build system, drawing from the Pathfinder 1 e-rules set and expanding it with mythic abilities, creates a character optimization space genuinely wider than most CRPGs attempt. The gap between a coherent build and an incoherent one is wide enough that the game includes a difficulty setting specifically for players who want the story without being punished for misallocating feats. Using it is fine. The story is worth it regardless of how you got there. Drakengard begins as a war story and gradually reveals that the war was never the point. Yoko Taro directed this 2003 PlayStation 2 action RPG, knowing it would have no sequel, which meant the 5 endings he designed had no obligation to resolve anything. None of them are good. The first ends in a Pyrrhic continuation. The second is quieter and worse. The fifth sends Kame and his dragon to modern-day Tokyo to fight the final boss in a rhythm game, which sounds like a joke and is also somehow the most disturbing ending in the series because it's the one that planted the seed for Nier. The game earns those endings through accumulation. Kame makes a pact with a dragon by trading his voice for survival, and what follows is an action RPG built around the compulsive satisfaction of slaughtering thousands of enemies while being made to feel nothing good about it. The weapons each carry short stories in their descriptions, histories of how they were made, and who was destroyed in the process. And collecting all 65 of them is required to unlock Ending E. The game is aware that you're doing this voluntarily. It has opinions about that. Companions join your party, not because they're good people, but because they're damaged ones. Leonard is haunted by something the Western release censored. Ariok has lost children and lost her mind around that loss. The choice Drakengard makes, to build a heroic fantasy structure and then systematically hollow out everything that makes heroic fantasy satisfying, is a creative decision that most games, even now, wouldn't dare to make. The combat is repetitive and the progression loop is grinding by design. Yoko Taro wanted you to feel what you were doing. Pathologic gives you 12 days to save a town from a plague that is already winning. It doesn't escalate toward catastrophe. It opens inside one, and your choices determine how much of what remains survives to the end. Developed by Icepick Lodge, a Russian studio that clearly didn't care whether anyone found the experience comfortable, it puts you inside one of 3 characters, a doctor, a surgeon, or a mystic, each with their own access to the same dying world and their own incomplete picture of what's actually happening. The town is decaying in real time, whether you're there or not. Events proceed on their own schedule. Miss a quest because you were hunting food, and that NPC is simply gone. What makes Pathologic's choices feel different from any other RPGs is that they're never framed as moral puzzles. Nobody give you a moment to think. Do you sell your coat to buy medicine and risk hypothermia? Or do you let someone suffer because you need to stay warm tonight? Do you loot a house that belongs to people who might still be alive? The game applies genuine scarcity to everything: food, medicine, time, trust, and the decisions that emerge from that scarcity feel less like game design and more like survival. Characters die if you don't reach them. Some can't be saved even if you do. The classic HD version fixed the translation from the 2005 original, which had been so broken it read like poetry. It still reads like poetry, just intentional poetry. The gameplay is deliberately unpleasant, slow, clunky, threatening, in a way that mirrors the misery of the subject. Knowing this going in matters. It's not a game that wants to entertain you in any conventional sense. It wants to make you understand, on some level below analysis, what it costs to watch a place die while still trying. Chrono Trigger puts you in control of time and then shows you exactly why that's more of a burden than a gift. The discovery that 1999 ends in planetary extinction isn't a narrative twist. It's delivered early, and the rest of the game is built around whether that future can be changed and at what cost. The answer to the game eventually arrives at is nuanced enough that multiple distinct endings support genuinely different arguments about fate, sacrifice, and what it means to fix something. The systems are deceptively elegant. Dual and triple tech attacks reward specific party compositions. The new Game Plus structure feeds the ending system, making completionists play a journey through alternate histories rather than a checklist. Each era the story passes through carries the weight of a world that exists independently of you, and actions in one period reshape others in ways the game tracks quietly. The merchant in the present exists because of something you did 1,000 years ago. The road you cleared opened a path that changed what a town became. What stays with you isn't the mechanics, but the emotional architecture around them. Frog's story, Luca's regret, the entire sequence in Zeal. These are built to make the stakes feel personal before they go cosmic. Most RPGs ask you to save the world as an abstraction. Chrono Trigger makes you care about specific people inside the world first, so that when the ending arrives, whatever ending you reach across its dozen plus possibilities, the weight of it lands. Valkyrie Profile is an RPG built on a deadline that can't be extended. Lenneth, a Valkyrie, descends to Midgard to collect the souls of worthy warriors before Ragnarok arrives on a fixed schedule. Each chapter advances the count. There are only so many chapters. The game measures your performance against the gods' expectations and determines whether you've earned a path to any of the 3 distinct endings, the best of which requires understanding a system the game specifically obscures from you. The soul collection structure is unlike anything else in the genre. Each warrior you encounter has a backstory told in a short vignette before they join your party. Some tragic, some simply unlucky, all of them human in a way that makes arming them for combat and then sending them to Valhalla feel complicated. The 2D platformer overworld, the side-scrolling dungeon exploration, and the turn-based combo combat create a tonal dissonance that works entirely in the game's favor. Nothing about Valkyrie Profile feels like a conventional JRPG, which is appropriate for a game where the protagonist's neutrality toward human death is the central moral tension. The ending players reach on a first play is almost certainly C, a quiet non-resolution that closes the game without answering its questions. Getting to ending A requires specific actions the game never signals, taken across chapters at precise moments. Discovering this either feels like betrayal or like the truest expression of what the game is about, depending on how you approach the idea that some outcomes require more than good intentions. Undertale's entire mechanical structure is a conversation about violence in games. The combat system gives you the option to spare every enemy, and Toby Fox built the game around what happens if you take that option seriously, and also what happens if you don't. The genocide route isn't unlocked by a choice. It's triggered by repeatedly doing something the game frames as normal in almost every other RPG, killing everything in an area. The game notices. Characters notice. The route ends somewhere that punishes the player in a way that persists across saves. The relationships the pacifist route are built specifically to give that route somewhere to cut. None of it lands on a first genocide playthrough without the pacifist context. The game requires both, either in sequence or through knowledge, because the horror of destroying something depends entirely on knowing what was there. Sans Fight, which sits at the end of this route, is the hardest encounter in the game because it's the route's only honest conversation. The only moment someone addresses what you actually did and asks why. What makes Undertale remarkable, beyond its cultural reach, is that it manages all of this inside genuinely affecting comedy and character writing. The affection Fox has for these characters is evident in every room, every encounter, every piece of music timed to a specific moment. Using that against the player isn't a trick, it's the point. The game needs you to have loved it first.